Take it away.
Okay, so just talking about a view from the prosecutor's office. And let's see here. Medical use of cannabis in Hawaii. Who can use cannabis for medical reasons in Hawaii? That's a qualifying patient, and we'll talk about that in a moment. A qualifying out-of-state patient that is legally authorized to use cannabis for medical purposes in another state, U.S. territory, or the District of Columbia. Minors under the age of 18 can also be qualifying patients. However, they must meet additional requirements to be a qualifying patient, and that is whether in-state resident or out-of-state. We'll talk about the definition of qualifying patient and debilitating medical condition, because those are always the subject of contention. A qualifying patient is a person who has been diagnosed by a physician or advanced practice RN as having a debilitating medical condition. And that is defined in the Hawaii Revised Statute, Section 329-121, with a non-exhaustive list. An unlisted condition can be approved by the Department of Health in response to a request from a physician, a PRN, or a potentially qualifying patient. How much cannabis can a qualifying patient have? A qualifying patient has to have, cannot have more than an adequate supply. And that's another definition that is somewhat varies from state to state, let's just say. And an adequate supply is an amount jointly possessed, no pun intended, between the qualifying patient and the primary caregiver that is not more than is reasonably necessary to ensure uninterrupted availability of cannabis for alleviating symptoms of the debilitating medical condition. The total amount cannot exceed 10 plants, whether mature or immature, and 4 ounces of any combination of usable cannabis and manufactured cannabis products. So that's a fairly substantial amount, far higher than our state's threshold for decriminalized possession, which is 3 grams, which is a very small amount. The adequate supply definition for a qualifying out-of-state patient is different, and you can again get more on that in HRS 329-121. So for an out-of-state patient, the amount individually possessed by a qualifying out-of-state patient or jointly possessed by a qualifying out-of-state patient under the age of 18 and the caregiver of the qualifying out-of-state patient that is not more than is reasonably necessary to ensure uninterrupted availability of cannabis for alleviating symptoms of a debilitating medical condition. It would be nice if legislators could work on brevity in writing these definitions so that they make more sense to people. The total amount, again, cannot exceed 4 ounces at any given time of any combination of cannabis and manufactured products, and living plants cannot be possessed by a qualifying out-of-state patient. When does the authorization not apply? Under Hawaii law, authorization for medical use does not apply to use that endangers the health or well-being of another person. And the authorization also does not allow the use of cannabis for purposes other than medical use. Medical use is not allowed in a school bus, a public bus, or any moving vehicle, including your personal vehicle, in the workplace of one's employment, on any school grounds, at any public park, public beach, public recreation center, recreation youth center, or at any other place open to the public except for transport. So you can transport it from place to place. It is okay, as I mentioned, to transport cannabis in any public place by qualifying patient, primary caregiver, qualifying out-of-state patient, caregiver of a qualifying out-of-state patient, or an owner or employee of a licensed medical cannabis dispensary, of which we have one here on Kauai. The transport restrictions under the law: the cannabis must be transported in a sealed container, cannot be visible to the public, cannot be removed from its sealed container or consumed while it's in a public place. If transporting the cannabis to a certified laboratory for testing, only up to 1 gram per test may be transported, and then only if they have an appointment, a confirmation was obtained with the time and date of the appointment, detailed description of the product and amount to be transported, and has that confirmation with them during transport. So again, they wrote these rules to be very narrowly tailored. Allowable transport does not presently include inter-island transportation by any means or for any purpose between a qualified patient, primary caregiver, qualifying out-of-state patient, caregiver of the out-of-state patient, and any other entity or individual. So that presents a potential problem in an island state where people move about frequently. Some protections for patients and caregivers, both in and out of state. They can assert medical use as an affirmative defense, but must strictly comply with statutes. This is HRS 329-125. Public schools cannot refuse to enroll or otherwise penalize, and landlords cannot refuse to lease property to a person solely for their status as a qualifying patient or caregiver, unless failing to do so would cause the school or landlord to lose monetary or licensing related benefits under federal law or regulation. For purposes of medical care, qualifying patients' use of cannabis in compliance with the law shall be considered the equivalent of the use of any other medication. So at least for purposes of this law, cannabis is treated like any other medication that and would not be considered use of an illegal substance. And again, there are protections regarding custody, visitation, and parenting time with a minor based on medical cannabis. No presumption of neglect of child endangerment for conduct allowed under the medical use of cannabis statutes unless their conduct created danger to the safety of the minor. I have not seen that situation arise in my time as prosecutor. Real briefly, give you my position on legalization for recreational use. I do support that. I am the only law enforcement official in Hawaii to testify in favor of legalizing cannabis for recreational use in the past session, as well as increasing the threshold for the amount of that may be possessed under the decriminalization statute. So I think at this point we've seen enough states that have done this and that have done it safely and that have done it effectively, and it's been beneficial to the state in terms of tax revenue, resources for education, and ending failed mass incarceration policies in the 1980s and 1990s. So with that, I'll note that we currently prosecute almost no cannabis-related offenses. We do not see cannabis as a major public safety threat to our community, or even as a minor public safety threat. We don't see it as a threat in our community. We see almost no violent cases that involve possession or consumption of cannabis. So with that, I'll open the floor up for questions. Let me see what we've got in the chat, if there's anything. Where's the chat? I will turn off screen sharing.
That was incredibly helpful, Justin. Thank you so much for that. I honestly believe that was the most information ever communicated verbally about the medical cannabis program to patients. We've had to rely on the written or digital documentation for this, which those of us who have been medicated when trying to learn more about the program find it extremely difficult to navigate the myriad of laws, rules, and regulations that we have to adhere to access medicine. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing that in a way that it reaches a lot more people. It's very impactful.
Sure. And, the laws have been getting better incrementally over the years. The program as originally conceived, I'm sure you remember, made it impossible. It said you could possess X number of plants, but there was no legal way to obtain the plants. It was intended to be inaccessible and opaque. The laws have gotten somewhat better over the intervening years, but there's still it's still a tough road to navigate for a lot of people. And part of my job is keeping the community safe, and that means helping people understand what the law is, because most people want to comply with the law.
Justin, thank you so much. I have a couple questions that have come up here.
Sure.
The first one is, what personally led you to support medical cannabis or cannabis in general?
Just my experiences seeing, knowing people in my life that have benefited from it. The studies that I've read that explain the medical benefits, just lived experience, I would say, of being somebody who's almost 48 years old and has been around and seen a few things. So, it just makes sense that we treat this like the medicine that it is, like that, recognize the benefits that it provides for people. And, we want to help people be healthy. Public safety and public health go hand in hand. And to me, the argument's not even a close one.
Thank you. Thank you. Wondering about a compliance check. So this is a question, let me see, to count plants and check labels and licenses. Yes, they show up with a SWAT team. They've actually shown up at my house with a huge SWAT team from Maui with bigger people than I'd ever seen. Is there any way to change the style of inspections so they're not intimidating patients?
I mean, it certainly, I would think so. I mean, that would be a question that I think the police chiefs would have to answer. I've advocated for removing funding from the Green Harvest program for years now and directing those funds to other areas where they could actually benefit the community. I don't feel that the current system of using the helicopters, they're very intrusive. Like you said, the militarization of the compliance checks, it seems excessive to me, and I would like to see that change.
Thank you. Last question looks like here is, if you have any insight into the 4 ounces versus 10 plants, how is it that we are allowed to grow 10 plants per patient, but only hold 4 ounces?
Yeah, and that I don't have a lot of insight into how the legislature arrived at that particular number. I am not a horticulturalist myself, so I don't have a keen understanding of the yield of each plant. And I suspect the people who wrote the law also did not have an understanding of that. And that's how we ended up with what seems to be an incongruous result in the statute. So, there's a lot of open-minded and smart people in the ledge, especially these days. And I think if people go to them and advocate for a more sensible balance, that's something they would take a serious look at based on my interactions.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything you'd like to say to wrap it up?
No, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I've appreciated being parts of these conferences over the years, and just hope y'all have a safe and healthy week, and take care.
Thank you so much, and back to you, Brent.